So, today, going into Thursday, we're going to talk about the decline of this perfectly just city that Plato has constructed. So the first thing to note is that Plato thinks that the decline and ultimately the destruction of this perfectly just city, this ideal city, is inevitable. Why? Why does he think that? If it's perfect, if it's a perfectly just city, if it's the best possible city, why must it disintegrate? I'm going to push back on that a little. We might think so, especially in our cultural philosophical context. But in general, at the time, the view of history and the view of civilization was very cyclical. So we get this more from Aristotle, who's Plato's student. But the view of history we see, especially in Aristotle, but in most of the Greeks generally, is static. Right? History is what it is. There is a gradual, there are gradual changes, but these changes tend to be not terribly major, and they tend to be cyclical. Right? So, and this is why you'll notice the conversation of the just society in the Republic is focused entirely on the city-state. He doesn't even take the time to consider whether a larger or a smaller community would be better. He stops and he just says, yeah, the city-state. We're looking for the ideal polis, this classical Greek political unit, where we get the term political. He doesn't think about what would be the perfect nation-state. He doesn't think about what would be the perfect empire. He doesn't think about what would be the perfect city in the modern sense. He's concerned solely with what would be the perfect polis. And we see this more explicitly later in Aristotle, who says that the polis is the perfect size for a society. Anything smaller, it's not self-sufficient. Anything larger, it dissolves into multiple parts and multiple factions. The city-state can maintain unity and can sustain itself. And for Aristotle, we see, or he at least points to what he sees as a trend of cities becoming too small, falling apart, empires becoming too large, and destroying themselves. And then it always comes back to the city-state. And by always, we mean, the historical perspective of a few hundred years.
Mm-hmm. What's like a size comparison to the polis? Like, I mean,
we don't necessarily have population numbers. We have citizenship numbers. So Athens, around the time of Socrates, had about 60,000 citizens. Big, and that includes Athens, the city, and the surrounding area, everyone who was a citizen. So that was, roughly speaking, anyone who qualified to vote in the assembly. I think it was around 60,000. And that was, so basically it's 60,000 heads of household, more or less. So the population was probably in the low 100,000s.
Are the citizens just the producers or the auxiliaries and the guardians too?
That's a very different question. So I don't think the question matters in the Republic. In the ideal polis, in the Kallipolis, the perfect city. In Athens, citizens were those who could vote.
Oh, okay.
Right? Athens was very much a democracy. It was the model democracy that we model post-Enlightenment, a lot of post-Enlightenment societies on. It was a direct democracy, but it was assembly-based. So people went to the assembly, and that's how you participate in the political process. Now, in the Kallipolis, in Plato's ideal city, he doesn't talk much about citizenship.
Right.
He talks about being a part of the city, which we can take to mean citizenship. They can take that to mean the equivalent. But producers don't have a political function. They don't take part in ruling or managing the city. Neither do auxiliaries, strictly speaking, and neither do at least half the guardians half the time. Because remember, guardians cycle through. So in terms of who's actually leading the city, who's actually the politically in charge of the city, in Plato's just city, it's a very small group of people at any given time. It is a few guardians, or even a single philosopher king or queen. He doesn't care. That can go either way, depending on whose turn it is, roughly speaking. So citizenship there is I don't think it's a category that Plato is concerned with in this context. So if we mean citizen by member of the city, someone who considers themselves part of the city and contributes to it, then everyone who lives there is a citizen, which is abnormal in the Greek context. If, on the other hand, we consider citizens those with political power, those who are concerned with ruling the city, then it's a small handful of people, which was also abnormal in the Greek context. So in either case, Plato's model is weird. So that turns out to be a good question. I hadn't really thought in those terms. So yes, good question.
So, so just to clarify, he doesn't talk about citizenship in his just city?
Not per se, right? He doesn't consider citizenship in terms that his audience would recognize it.
So how would you,
He does talk about who has political authority and who takes part in the management of the city, which is probably what an Athenian would take citizenship to be. So we can probably interpret it that way.
so like then
But then it would be just a few guardians.
who has control of the city? Like how do they make their decisions?
A few guardians, some of the guardians at any given time. Right? Because remember, the guardians are the ones who are best at and responsible for ruling the city, but they also have this dual function. They have to know the truth and implement it. So those who are busy in abstract contemplation, in theoretical study, aren't actively ruling. Right? They have to take their turn ruling the city. It's seen as something of a burden. So it's a few of the guardians who are ruling at any given time, or even just one. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
I was just thinking, like, wasn't one of the major critiques of the Athenian democracy at the time is that the loudest speakers, not necessarily the most affluent or best or smartest speakers, were the ones that kind of dominated the forum?
Yeah. It was the demagogues, or, if you will, the product of democracy. Right? The people who were able to sway the majority. And I want to hold off a little bit on some of the critiques of democracy, because we'll get to that. That's our like fourth step down this slide into the city falling apart. It's interestingly right before tyranny, which is right before the city collapsing. It's pretty far downhill. Plato does not have a very high view of democracy. But we'll get to that. So we'll hold off on some of the other criticisms. There are a lot there.
If the city is ruled by a single king or a few group of people, who chooses such like rulers? Are they like elected and voted on?
No, it's based on this education system of who's best equipped. Right? So the previous rulers will find those who are best suited to rule, will properly educate them. They'll become those best suited to rule, and then they will gradually take over. It's a very, we might say, elitist system of rulership. Plato will refer to this model as an aristocracy. So it really is a rulership passed on down a line of people who are hopefully the best suited to rule. That's kind of where flaws can come in, at least in part. But it's supposed to be ideally ruled by the best people, the people who are best equipped to rule. How that's determined is, well, by the people who are best at determining who's best equipped to rule, which are the previous guardians. You can see why corruption can be a danger here. And Plato sees the problem too, and Socrates explains this in this chapter. Did you have something else?
Oh, I was going to say, so you were just comparing Greek Athens to the just city, right?
Comparing and contrasting. I think there's more contrasts than comparisons. Plato would say, at least, I think. But yeah, there have to be some comparisons because he's speaking to an Athenian audience. So That's like me giving a seminar on political theory and not once mentioning the American political system in this classroom. And I have sparsely, and the reason I have so sparsely is because we're not really talking about politics so much as talking about moral psychology, ethics, etc.
I just had a quick one. Are we talking about book 8 or book 7?
8.
8. Okay.
8.
Are we going to go over book 7? Or?
Book 7, okay, so book 7 is mostly extrapolations on the cave. And it has to do with what the philosopher's role is. And that's going to play into our, so I'm going to be kind of referring back to it when we discuss the aristocracy, and then what makes it collapse. Because a lot of what's in book 8, and a lot of this transition from the aristocracy, so the rule by the right, by the just, by the best, transitioning from that to the timocracy, so rule by the honorable or rule by soldiers, a lot of what causes that transition is things going wrong with the description we find in book 7. And then if you go further back, things going wrong with the description of education that we see in 5 and 6. So unless we want to, unless anyone wants to, we're perfectly willing to. But unless we want to, I wasn't planning on going into too much detail on the rest of book 7. Should I? Okay. If not, then that's fine. So we can. So let's take a look at our just city, our Callipolis, or our aristocracy. Okay. What does our perfectly just city look like? How's it structured?
Triangle.
Yeah.
The guardians, the auxiliaries, and the producers.
Triangle's a good enough model. Go with it. It's divided into 3 parts. And the guardians at the top.
Auxiliaries, and
So the auxiliaries are the soldiers. Enforcing the will of the guardians, carrying out what they want, what the guardians command, in defense of the city and for the sake of its cohesion. And then what is at the bottom? What's the largest section?
producers.
Producers. This is everyone who makes things for the city. Okay, so all of these are working together for the sake of the good of the whole city. Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that hypothetically a perfect city does not have someone who has no, like, is useless, or does not produce, like, someone?
Right, exactly, yes. So the perfectly just city should not have anyone useless in it. Everyone has a function to play within the just city. If they don't, that is some element of injustice. Because part of justice is everyone having a proper role to play and having that role be directed towards the good of the city as a whole. So if there's, so to speak, useless people, or people who are
Just consumers.
people who are just consumers, people who are acting selfishly, right? Acting for their own good rather than the good of the city. People who are, let's say, left out of the organizational structure of the city. Anything like that will mean that this isn't a just city. Those people will start appearing as we go through. Really only start appearing once we get to democracy. But that's going to be a major part of what causes the city to actually dissolve. For now, there's nobody like that. Everybody has their role to play, and everyone plays it as well as they can and as well as they need to. Another question?
I just lost it for a second, but I'll let you know when I come.
Raise your hand again. I'll come back to it. So, all right. What is the rule of the city for the sake of? The rulers, what are they ruling for?
Justice.
Justice. Yeah. Anything else? So let me contextualize what you're saying. So justice is the foremost value of the city. That's what's most valuable. They're ruling for the sake of what?
Good.
The good of
People.
and
Common good.
yeah. So the good of the people. Something to add?
like doing justice to its own system itself.
Yeah, so yes. Now when you say efficiency, I was hesitating because we tend to interpret that in terms of efficiency of production. Not necessarily. Efficiency of running as a cohesive unit. Yes. So rule for the sake of the good. And this is the good of the city and the good itself. Right. So this is for the sake of not only, this is this twofold thing again, right? So it's for the sake of the ultimate good, right? We need to have the city structured well. And then it's also for the sake of the city itself, right? So the rulers aren't ruling for their own sake. They're not ruling merely for some outside purpose. They're ruling, importantly, for the good of the whole city. And its primary value is justice. Justice is what the city is primarily structured by. In other words, justice is the most important thing to the city as a whole. And through being just, that involves or requires having the other virtues in their proper places as well. Okay. So, what happens to the aristocracy that causes it to start its decline, start fracturing?
Is it just like trying to replace the old guardians? Kind of like in a sense,
By what? How do you mean?
like because if you try to replace them with just people and say like they're ultimately, not knowing they're ultimately flawed, that will slowly lead to the decline of what they're trying, the main purpose of the city.
So guardians becoming imperfect is part of it, but it's imperfect in a particular kind of way.
Isn't it kind of like when, so we kind of go back to like the example where they can't raise their own children, so they kind of pick favorites, the guardians sort of pick favorites, and that's when it starts to...
Yeah, so this flaws start to develop and fractures start to appear in the structure of the city. Once the guardians begin to favor some new guardians over others, for some reason other than their being the best or other than justice. Most commonly, according to Plato, this happens when parents favor children and children favor parents. So, use the example of someone who finds out who his father is and finds out, this is a guardian, mind you. A guardian finds out who his father is and finds out that his father is not one of the top-notch guardians, not one of the best. And so, the young guardian, the guardian-to-be, seeks, instead of ruling for the sake of the city as a whole, instead of seeking the good of the city as a whole, is seeking to elevate his father for the sake of family honor, against the good of the city as a whole. So, things begin to fracture when fractures appear within the guardians. People start acting for the goods of themselves, the goods of people they have particular loyalties to, instead of the good of the city as a whole. So what is this next city called that develops from this fall?
Tyranny?
Not yet. That's the last step before it destroys itself.
Democracy?
It's like
You're going backwards.
democracy, right?
Timocracy is next, yeah. This is the next best, right? This isn't by any means a terrible system. And this isn't saying that Timocratic systems are wholly corrupt or are on the verge of collapse. He envisions this process as taking several generations. Right? So Plato envisions a generation passing between each of these. So this is a gradual process, and these kinds of changes and corruptions take time, but he does think they're inevitable. These kinds of fractures will ultimately develop And they develop because there are faults in the guardian's education system, which he said they have to guard above anything else. So guardians aren't being taught justice anymore, aren't being taught wisdom anymore, but are starting to learn for the sake of honor, learn for the sake of personal reputation, glory, being better than their compatriots. Yeah.
Democracy is what?
Timocracy is rule. It's essentially ruled by the military. Is the short version. So how does that happen? How do we get from rule by the best to rule by these folks? Well, to answer that, we have to ask, what does it rule for the sake of?
This.
For the sake of honor.
Yeah. Now, it's rule for the sake of honor for the city and for the individual. So it's not just, generals competing with each other to be the best general, but rather generals competing with each other to make the city most honorable, right? To win victories for the city. Right? It's still for the sake of the city, but it's no longer for the sake of the whole city, and it's no longer for the sake of the best part of the city. So it's honor of the city and the individual. So we haven't completely collapsed. Yeah, we're still ruling for the sake of the city, kind of.
So with a fragile ego.
But yes, with a fragile ego. It's important. So why? How does this transition happen? Well, we said the Guardian started. Oh, yeah.
Just a quick question.
Mhm.
For this type of was it Timocracy? So it's ruled by the military.
Mhm.
Okay. And so it's I just want to clarify. So it's just like the highest ranking general will be the guy in charge of the whole city.
Yeah, generally.
All right.
Sorry. Right, so in general, the highest ranking or the most honorable or even the general or military commander with the best reputation for victory is going to be in charge. It's still very meritocratic, right? It's not to the point where it's military commanders fighting each other or turning on each other. We're not there yet. But there's now a different standard for rulership.
So the Guardians or some of the Guardians aren't ruling anymore? Okay.
The Guardians per se are not ruling at all. In fact, it's something more like this. So, I'm not keeping the shapes the same because apparently I just can't try to track those. Right. So we have the former auxiliaries. We have the former guardians. And then we still have the producers.
Oh, so not even the auxiliaries are.
So the auxiliaries
Are the military?
the military people.
Oh, okay, okay.
So these are the people in charge. Now,
Okay.
they have their own hierarchy based on honor, but they, in general, the military as a unit, is the part that's in charge of the city. The former guardians, the wise people of the city, people who are best at knowledge, both theoretical and practical, are relegated to something like management. So rather than ruling the city, rather than providing the ends that the city will pursue, they're now helping the former auxiliaries, they're now helping the military to achieve their ends, to achieve their goals. The reason and the wisdom of the guardians is becoming purely instrumental.
So this is like the next generation of like, I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, so the story he tells goes something like this. The guardians in the aristocracy start to become corrupt.
Okay.
They start to value their honor above the good of the city. And they start trying to obtain honors for themselves and their families, which now they're starting to know about. And they're competing for honor, right? For honor, reputation, for being the best. Right? They want to be the best instead of wanting their city to be the best. Okay, who in the city is best at being honorable, at obtaining glory?
Auxiliaries?
Yes. These people are better than these people at that task, because that's their job. They're good at military glory. They're good at being good on the battlefield. So, if these people are now ruling on the basis of honor, like they're trying to compete over who can be the most honorable, and that's the person who tries to be in charge, who winds up being in charge, then we've changed the standard of who gets to be a ruler. We've gone from the most just or the best at ruling to the most honorable or the best reputation. And who is the most honorable and has the best reputation? The auxiliaries. They beat the guardians at the new game.
So this is how the city is declining, is what
Yeah.
you're saying? Okay, okay, okay. I thought
So
you
this
were
is the next step down.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
It really sounds like the Roman Empire.
Yes, and the Athenian Empire, and the British Empire, and the Connaught, and the Han Empire, and question maybe for later, the American Empire? There might be disanalogies there, but there are certainly analogies as well.
So at this point, it's like,
Sorry, he's describing a paradigm, essentially, right? He's describing what happens to a society that works well as it dissolves, as it declines. The Roman Empire is the easiest to see, certainly, especially we know a lot about it and it was spread out across history. But this happens everywhere in every part of the world, especially as considering that Plato wrote this 300 years before Rome even became an empire. Sorry.
so, it's kind of like a two-part question. My first question is, like, so what made them think that, or let's change our, let's change sort of like the organization, or who's in charge, or what made them think that?
What made them change from
From
just-
aristocracy to non-democracy?
Okay, yeah. Essentially, it comes down to two things. So the guardians were no longer being properly educated. And properly sorted. Right? So the education system involves the part of finding who is the best potential guardian, finding out who is gold, so to speak. And then it also involves raising them to value wisdom and knowledge as their chief role in the just city. This changes to a gradual a shift towards competition between guardians, say. Wanting to be the better guardian than the other person next to you. And then it also involves a disillusion of this idea of the guardians as one united family. That's how they're supposed to see themselves. Right? They're supposed to see themselves as the guardians. Right? I am a guardian. I am the son of these guardians. Not these two guardians, but the guardians. Instead of that, it becomes, I'm the son of this guardian and that one, and I want those people that I'm a descendant of to be seen as the best. Right? Or if I find out who my children are, I want what's best for them rather than what's best for the guardians as a whole, rather than what's best for the city as a whole.
So it started out like as a group, but then it became more, it started drifting towards individualism a little bit.
Individualism, but more importantly, disunity. Disunity through individualism.
So going back, he said that the guardians now choose future guardians based on things that they're not supposed to choose based on, like for example, like honor, like you said. And that's because like a fault in their education, which was the most thing they had to protect. Do we get to know what exactly was the fault in their education?
Briefly, he doesn't spend nearly as much time on that as he spends on the actual education system itself. He spends more time on the results of the flaws. So you can kind of see what goes wrong by what flaws emerge. Presumably a focus on military more physical education than poetry and music. Then a focus more on, let's say, practical wisdom than theoretical wisdom. And so more of the focus becomes on the ruling than on the knowing. And the problem with that is that's very competitive. Being able to rule over people means you are clearly the best at it, and so wanting to be the best at it leads to competition between people, and then the focus, this goes to the next part, the focus shifts from being the best at ruling to simply being the best. Maybe a silly analogy, but thinking back to the Summer Olympics a few years ago, Michael Phelps said something that I think is relevant to this, the swimmer. He says if you look at like recordings of me winning the golds, you'll see me passing the guy next to me. And look at what each of us are looking at. I'm looking at the goal and he's looking at me. What does that mean?
He's implying that he's like the best in that.
Okay, yeah.
Because-
Well, that's
because
true.
he's
You
not
got
worried
like
about what everyone else is
a
doing.
20-something gold medal. What'd you say?
He's not concerned with what everyone else is doing.
Right. He's aiming at the goal. Right. Whether he's going faster than other people or not, well, he'll find out. What he's doing is he's going for the goal. Right? Here, in the aristocracy, what the guardians should be doing is focusing on knowing the truth and ruling justly. What happens gradually is they start focusing on, instead of knowing the truth, they focus on knowing more than the guy next to me. Instead of ruling justly, they focus on ruling more effectively than the guy next to me. So it becomes competitive rather than cooperative. And at that point, it's the auxiliaries that are the best at competition, because that's the whole point. Right? They're the ones who resolve conflict, either within the city or against outsiders. So naturally, the auxiliaries are going to be better at this new game that the guardians are starting to play. So they're going to take over. They're going to show that, well, really, we're the most honorable. We're the best. So we're going to rule. And you can manage things. The guardians can just manage things.
How does the one in the left fall apart if you just have a philosopher king? Like instead of a group of guardians, you just have one philosopher king.
Then the other guardians beneath the philosopher king start thinking, I could do a better job than that. Whether correct or not, doesn't matter. Even if they're right. Saying, I could do better, instead of I could do well, means that there's going to be competition emerging. Or worse still, my son could do better. Because then you're in a position to, manipulate the system for the sake of somebody else, but still for the sake of the honor of people associated with you. And that means we have alliances against alliances, and the guardians start fracturing. So whether it's a philosopher king, whether it's a council of guardians, whether it's a rotating council, whether it's a rotating kingship, doesn't matter. Regardless, there's competition can emerge among the rulers. That leads to the auxiliaries moving up in the city, taking control. Okay. So if this democracy is ruled for the sake of honor, so the city is directed towards honor, what's this going to look like, socially speaking? What is their society going to look like? If it's for the sake of honor, military victory,
Lots of strong people.
maybe
Lots of competition.
lots of competition, very competitive.
This is like Boss Micah's his thing about having power and that using as your advantage.
Not so much Thrasymachus, though you're looking in the right place. Because remember, Thrasymachus is his idea of justice is very, very corrupt. Right? This idea of justice being weak. We still think justice is a good thing, kind of. We think honor and courage are more important. Justice is still good. Who in Book 1 does this maybe sound more like? The competitive aspect. Well, he wasn't really in Book 1, but I see where your point is. So, yeah, Glaucon to a degree. Glaucon does like this system. Paul Marcus, yes. Do good to friends and harm to enemies. That's the point of the city.
So that means there's going to be like a lot of war.
Tons of war, because how else are they going to gain honor?
Yeah.
Right. What does that do to the city? What does that do to, say, the producers?
can't do their job?
Isn't it like stress them out a lot?
The job's going to change. It can.
They'll have to work a lot more.
Maybe. Maybe not, though. Maybe they'll work the same, but they'll work on different things.
They won't be like knowing, sorry.
You then. You first, then you can.
I thought that some of them would have more work than the others, as in, like, if they're fighting, they would have more use for shields and.
Yeah, so certain producers would certainly have more work than others would. The importance of various productive professions would change radically. Something else to
I
add?
was gonna say, like, if the producers have children, like, they won't be able to get a job or something, like, the guardians won't teach.
Yeah, so there's no one
children,
to
so they-
organize
Yeah,
what people are doing.
yeah.
So there's nobody to say, here's what you ought to do, here's what
Mhm.
you ought to do. So producers start moving into chaos as well.
Is the population
That's
of
important.
producers also going to increase in the sense of if people are fighting and taking over like other areas? That, I mean, if you get rid of most of like the auxiliaries, what's left is gonna be mostly producers?
It can be for that reason, so these people dying off, so this
Yeah.
grows in proportion. That can certainly happen.
Or even now,
Um,
they can't fight for their city, or like they can't,
What do you mean? Wait, who can't
protect
fight for the city?
the auxiliaries. They can't protect it from others coming in.
That can be a problem, right? Presumably, this city is really good at defending itself, but we already said that the perfectly just city, the aristocracy, is the most efficient at everything it tries to do. Right? That structure works.
Mm.
This one tries to be better at conflict. That's a short-term goal. That is a very short-term solution. Who do you, raise your hand if you think you're the strongest person in this room. All right, cool. Let me rephrase the question. Raise your hand if you think you could take any other person in this room in a fight. All right, cool. So suppose you were to come up, don't. Suppose you were to come up here. How many people do you think you could take down in a row?
In a row?
In a row.
So like I fight one-on-one and then when I keep the person, the next person comes?
Yep.
I don't know, I'd probably say 3.
3. All right. So, great. You have a great short-term solution to gaining stuff. That's fighting. But if there's more than 3 people around, there's an issue. All right. How many people at once?
I'd probably say 2.
Okay. So if there's 2 people working together, you might be okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if there's more than 2 who are willing to work together, also you have a problem. This kind of conflict is at best a good short-term solution. Because it's costly, first of all. And that has effects on the city as a whole and on the people within the city. Because, okay, we mentioned producers, certain producers having to produce more, other producers not having to produce as much, or, maybe more likely, producers sort of shifting their focus into military goods and less towards consumption goods or necessities or luxuries, what have you. What does, oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what do you mean they lose money? That's what you said, right?
It costs money to fight a war. You're losing resources, people are dying, you're using things to fight. Now, less so in this context than maybe today, where we fire a missile that costs $6 million or something. That's on the low end, I'm sure. But still, if you break a spear, that's someone's 2 weeks. Right? That's a smith fixing a spearhead for a week or 2. There's a lot of effort that goes into fighting a war that could be otherwise allocated. Right? And so if we're not allocating those resources towards necessities, towards luxury goods, what's life going to start looking like in the city?
Certain things are gonna become really scarce.
Yep.
Which
Life's
means
gonna be
more
harder.
competition.
Life's going to be harder, especially for these people. And I say especially for these people because, well, these people rule the city, and they're not particularly concerned with justice. They're particularly concerned with honor. And since they're the most honorable, it stands to reason they should get the most, right? You see this in most Greek city-states. Most of the ones that are concerned with honor. I mentioned this before, talking about Socrates. What he requested as his alternative punishment to being put to death was free meals for life in the Lycaeum, which was the Hall of Olympic Champions. Well, there was a Hall of Olympic Champions where Olympic champions ate free for life. That tells you something about, value of honor. So not only are these people producing less necessities and luxuries in favor of military hardware, effectively, but these people are getting more of the necessities and luxuries by comparison. So the producers are pretty hard off, not doing so well. They're living what one might call a Spartan lifestyle. And yes, this model is based very, very heavily off of Sparta. Hence the term.
Wouldn't some of the producers become useless then? Like,
Yeah, they might. Yeah, they might. What's a jeweler going to do in a city that's primarily concerned with warfare?
Nothing.
Not a lot. Not a whole lot. Maybe something. But what is enough jewelers going to do in a city primarily concerned with warfare? Yeah.
I don't know, if they're in a city, Aristocratic City, they might be pulling stuff out to
Yeah, you need their help for the sacking of the next city over. Maybe that.
They
But
can't
that's
trade their armor.
yeah. Well,
They meet at one bridge and trade the armor over and trim.
small clasps.
yeah, clasps. Yeah, so you can change the work you're doing, maybe. But doing what you're best at is no longer an option. And that leads to inefficiencies in the productive sense. That also leads to people, let me explain by analogy. What happens to a coal miner when the coal mine shuts down?
They're out of work.
He's out of a job.
Yeah, then what?
Probably has to.
Okay, that's one option.
Wow.
He dies.
He probably has to retrain.
He's got to retrain.
Yeah,
So
for
education.
something.
Yep, so he's got to put a lot of effort into learning a new skill, and he's not doing what he's best at, right? Because his previous option was the thing he selected as the thing he could do that would produce the best. And so he's having to go to his next best option. Not a great thing. Or alternatively, what else? What if it's a lot of coal miners? This has happened like, a little bit north of here in the U.S.
What you call back though, so it's fine.
I'm talking like 150 years ago, not like last year. Yeah.
did rebel.
Yeah,
They will.
they can rebel.
Oh yeah, protest.
Yeah, these people can start, for example, refusing to produce for these people because the auxiliaries rely on the producers just as much as the producers rely on the auxiliaries. The city is still very much interdependent, which is not a bad thing. So they can rebel in the more measured sense of refusing to produce what needs to be produced for the sake of warfare, and then rein back in the auxiliaries. So this can be continued for a short amount of time, albeit, again, very inefficiently. Or they can rebel and attempt to overthrow the auxiliaries.
So going back a little bit, are you saying that like the guardians are useless now?
No, the guardians are still useful for managing the city.
Oh, okay.
Right. They're managing. They're basically middle management for the auxiliaries who are ruling. And they're the people who manage supply of military hardware. They're the people who help strategize for warfare. And they're doing half of their old job. They're still doing the practical part of their old job without the theoretical part informing it. Right? They're not directing the city as a whole, but they're managing individual parts of it for the sake of the auxiliaries who are now in charge. They still have guardians, and they're still doing a job. They're just not doing as important a job, and they're not doing their correct, proper job. So in general, what happens when a bunch of untrained and unarmed rebels go against the most trained army in the region?
They fit.
Lots of
These people die,
A lot.
right? Most of them. Then what happens?
Now there's not a lot of producers to do what they.
Yeah, there's like none. Or very few. Or maybe a few loyal ones. I'll note, people who are not in a position to supply the auxiliaries with what they need to be supplied by. So this becomes a lose-lose position for the auxiliaries. Either they wipe out their supply base, their producers, or they surrender control of the city. Either way, these people lose power. We move on to the next stage. So, at this point, who's in charge?
No one.
Still people in charge.
There's nothing left to be in charge of, though.
Well, there is. If, there are plenty of people who survive.
Smugglers.
So do we go like to the next level down with the producers now?
Certain producers. This is referred to as an oligarchy. Which we tend to think of as rule by a few people. That's not necessarily what it means in this context. It happens to be a few people, but it's a very specific few people. Who generally... So suppose there is a revolt among producers, or among workers. Typically, who manages to both lead the revolt and survive the revolt? What?
Bourgeoisie.
Yeah. Marx liked his Plato, I will say. He way reinterpreted a lot of it. He really liked this stage. Actually, no, he really liked the next stage. But we'll get there. And, focused way too much on one particular part. But, you're right? What do we mean in general there?
Just the people who, they seize the means of production. They are the particular producers that take everything over.
No. They already have the means of production, right? These producers.
Right.
So it's not quite Marxian yet, or really at all, but it's not here. That's not where we're at, right?
The rich producers?
Yes. The oligarchy is ruled by the rich. And it's certain producers over auxiliaries and guardians. Guardians are still there. They're still managing things. Right? They're still keeping things organized, keeping things running, because every good banker needs an accountant. The auxiliaries are still there because the rich people need to protect their money, but they're particularly concerned with protecting their money. And the other producers are there as well. And I will note, they're better off than they were here. Why is that? At least initially. Why are the other producers, the relatively poor producers, why are they better off in business?
Can you explain the trapdoors?
Oh, yeah. So producers, guardians, and auxiliaries.
It's because it's a seller's market now, essentially.
Something like that. And so the rich are over the poor here.
Which way the producers are the rich?
So the rich producers and poor producers. So this square of producers is stratified. The richer people are more in control, the poorer people have less control.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So all the producers would still have jobs?
Yeah. At this point, yeah. Except they would shift, now they'd have to shift their production again from military supplies to necessities and some luxuries. Necessities more so. More necessities, because that's what was primarily missing in the previous city. There was a lack of necessary goods. And the rich tend to concern themselves more with what is immediately needed than with opulence. Opulence always comes second to necessity. And the rich, because they're good at managing wealth, know that. Because that's what they're supposedly best at. So this is rule by the rich for the sake of wealth. And I'll say wealth and security. I say security, and I emphasize this because it informs a lot about why this city does what it does. So keeping this in mind, this idea of wealth and security of the city as a whole and of the rulers, this isn't, again, we're still not talking about just for the sake of the rulers. Right? The oligarchs are concerned with the wealth of the city as a whole because a prosperous city means they're able to accumulate more wealth. So they're concerned with the wealth of the city and the security of both themselves and the city. So what does this look like? What does this city do? How does the city interact with other cities? And what does the structure of the city internally look like?
Trade, lots of trade.
One at a time. Hands.
Sorry.
They're gonna try reaching out to sell their goods to other cities and become not self-sufficient.
Yeah, so they're going to be trading a lot more. They're going to be interacting a lot more and peacefully.
I was saying the same thing.
Same thing? Yep. Anything else? Trade's nice. Anything else I do?
More than trading, they're in a production city. There probably will be more like actual physical production, whether or not that leaves the city.
They're going to be producing a lot internally, both to trade and to use.
And maybe
So-
not using all of it, so it will be excess.
Yeah, so they're going to be accumulating excess wealth. Okay, think back to book 2. Way far. Why did the initial ascetic city, the first little city that Socrates develops, why didn't they need an army? Why is that important? You're absolutely right. Why is this important?
They didn't have to worry about protecting it.
Didn't have anything excessive to protect. Because who's going to invade a city for a silo of grain and some honey? No, you're going to invade a city for gold. Right? Now the converse is true. Now they have lots of excess stored wealth. What do they need to worry about?
Constantly being invaded.
Yes, how do they worry about that? What do they do to fix it?
Buying the people around them.
They buy them off. They buy them off. They've already been down this road. They're not going to give more power to the auxiliaries. Besides, fighting a war is incredibly expensive. It's much cheaper to buy off people and say, please don't attack us. We'll pay tribute. Typical way of doing things, especially in the ancient world.
I mean, it's also going to be internal.
How do you mean?
So thieves.
Yeah. So part of the solution to thieves and things, right? Because people are valuing wealth more than anything. Solutions to that are going to have to be to do with social cohesion and to do with increasing the material prosperity of the city in general. So if the poor people are less poor, they're less likely to go into theft, is generally the idea of what's going on here. That becomes a problem. Why does that become a problem if these people are great at accumulating wealth? How is there going to be a problem with keeping the city prosperous and wealthy? We just,
It's inequality.
that is a problem, but it doesn't spark into a major problem until things start going bad. How do they go bad?
Jealousy.
Was it?
Jealousy.
That's what's kind of smoldering. That's not the spark.
Who actually has ownership of the wealth?
True. But the city in general is not poor. Even the poor aren't necessarily poor. They're not as bad off as they were here.
If they're just really good at accumulating money, it doesn't mean they're good at spending it and stimulating the rest of the city.
True. So these are the kind of, now the rich people here are, Plato portrays them as something like the Scrooge McDuck character. That they're, because remember, it's not just wealth, it's wealth and security. And what's more secure than having more money than you know what to do with, just in case, right? Yeah. And not even for the sake of swimming in it, for the sake of having it just in case. If you have a savings account, you're thinking like this to a degree. Now, to a degree, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It becomes excessive if you're eating nothing but ramen and have $6 million in your bank.
The dream.
Why?
Dream?
That shouldn't be the dream. Okay?
Maybe just likes ramen.
I could buy the expensive ramen.
Oh yeah,
Fancy ramen.
the 70 cents a pack instead of 30. If only that money could come in. Right, but the point is, right, so it's an excess of thrift for the sake of security. So that's contributing extremely to the inequality of the city. But what else is contributing to, what else is making it difficult for them to accumulate wealth? As a city, as a whole, forget about stratification, what's making it hard for the city to become wealthy?
Where does the money come from?
Well, producing.
Other people making more money.
Other cities, that can be a problem. People here are envious, so the city will wind up being envious of other cities. That's an issue. But we just talked about, what did we just talk about? What does this city have trouble doing?
Fighting.
Yeah. Okay. City can't fight well.
So they're spending a lot of money on buying other people off?
Most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This city, which is most concerned with wealth and security, is buying off people so that they won't be attacked. Right? And it makes sense this time, maybe the next time. But it doesn't necessarily make sense year after year after year with every city around you. That becomes a problem and it becomes unsustainable. So just like the problem with the democracy, right? The problem with, the person, yeah, you can beat up anybody around you, but you can't beat up 3 people around you. And you can't beat up everybody around you every time, right? Same thing here. You can pay off somebody. Right? You can pay off Sparta, but you can't pay off Sparta and Athens and Greece every year. Mm-hmm.
Where is the money coming from to pay these people off? Like, are the richest people contributing to it, or is it like economy?
It's probably the richest people, right? Because they're the ones most concerned about the wealth,
Yeah.
the wealth of the city. They're in charge, which is somewhat different than what we would think of this kind of thing in general. But that problem means they're going to be pressing the rest of the city harder, trying to extract more wealth out of the city. And that's going to cause all sorts of problems internally. The city is no longer going to be able to even fulfill its best thing, the thing that it values most, being wealthy and secure. And everyone's going to start living a worse lifestyle. Except the rich, who are still trying very hard to maintain wealth and security at all costs. This is when we start transitioning from the good of the city to the good of the rulers. And so what happens when everyone sees the rulers of the city buying off every invader who comes by, who also see the general wealth and welfare of the city declining? What happens?
Jump ship.
Jump ship. They fight. It's going to be violent or not. And it's probably not going to be because, remember, rulers are cowards. They're more concerned about their own wealth and safety. So what's going to happen is the poor, probably with the help of the former auxiliaries and guardians, are going to take over. Because there's more of them as well. The rich are going to probably let it happen as long as they can keep their wealth and prosperity. And we're going to move to our next kind of city. Democracy. This is what happens when we shift from the rich being in control to the rich, roughly speaking, relinquishing control so that the poor and everyone else in the city can have their say in ruling the city, in doing what's best or what they think is best. So this is where we move from a structure to a blob. Because the city is no longer ruled for the sake of anything. The city at this point is only together because there are people together who are trying to use each other for their own benefit. So the city is ruled by the mob. And it's for the sake of what each individual wants. This is the city of advertisers. This is the city of, I want everyone to want the thing that I want so I can get the thing that I want. Because what better way is there to get what you want than by voting for it? Well, maybe not. But what better way is there to get what I want than to get everyone else to want it too, so that we all can get it, right? The city can get it as a whole. We can work together to accomplish the things I want to accomplish. The trouble is everyone's trying to do that. The aristocrats are trying to rule the city for the sake of justice, trying to reorganize and make the city good. Or maybe they've given up on that and they just want to be left alone to contemplate, to consider the truth. Maybe they're just going and being cloistered academics. Okay, that's what they want the city to do. The trouble is there's like 10 of them. Exaggeration. But there's a tiny minority. The same goes for soldiers. Soldiers want honor. How do they do that? Well, they have to do it in such in a way that they can sell it to everybody else. And this is where you get things like Olympic Games or gladiators. Relatively safe, relatively low cost, and relatively harmless ways of fulfilling people's desires for honor. Okay, the rich are generally allowed to keep their wealth as long as they don't make other people's lives bad with it. So the rich get kind of what they want. Of course, they can't accumulate wealth very well because everybody wants something different, so it's a little bit difficult for them to accumulate lots of wealth, but they can keep what they have for the most part. I mean, unless you get enough people to vote to take it away from them, but you gotta be careful. And then every other random individual sort of just wants the things that they want, and they try and get the things that they want by getting the entire city behind them. Everyone is pulling the city in different directions. Everybody wants different things. Because of that, the city can't function together. The city functions, but it functions like a marketplace. It's hard to call this a city in the same sense that the aristocracy was. Plato describes the democratic city as many-colored, or multicolored. That there's all sorts of things, flashy things, happening everywhere, trying to draw everyone's attention. Think Times Square. The word he uses for multicolored, the ancient Greek, is the same word in modern Greek means appetizer platter. That also gives you kind of an idea of what's going on here, right? What do you do when you go out with a bunch of friends, you can't decide what to get?
You get a bunch of things.
You get the appetizer platter. Who's satisfied?
Nobody.
Probably not, right? Maybe that guy who really likes the mozzarella sticks and guards them preciously. But that's it, right? No one is really satisfied. Maybe one or two people in the demos are satisfied. But the city as a whole, okay, I guess. Be great if I could get more of what I want. But yeah, is that?
It's average.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's like Applebee's on a Friday night.
I brought this up with appetizers, so yeah. Half price apps, man. But this is what goes on here, right? This is what democracy looks like. Everyone running and screaming in their own direction, trying to attract everybody's attention to want the same thing that they want, so that they can get it, so they can get more of it, and get enough of it. It's their particular little desires. Everyone is trying to rule the city for their own sake. So remember I said, somewhere here, we transition from ruling for the sake of the city to ruling for the sake of the ruler. We've fully transitioned now. The rulers of the city, which is everybody, is ruling for the sake of the rulers of the city. Not for the sake of the city as a whole, but for their own sake. Right? Everyone is voting for their own interest, right? What they want to get out of the city. So everybody is trying to rule selfishly. The trouble is, no one can do it. Okay, what happened? Yeah, questions?
So how does this like idea of Plato's democracy relate to like, because the whole purpose of this experience is this experiment is to design like the just person. So how does that relate back to the just soul?
This is an unjust. Well, this is an analogy for for a particular kind of unjust soul.
So it would be like each different desire is ruling it like in a million different directions, and the soul can't find like one particular direction.
Have you ever been alone and ordered the appetizer platter?
Yeah.
There you go. I was banking on you saying yes to that.
I mean, you know me.
Yeah, well enough. That's what happens, though, right? So we'll get more into the analogies, because each one of these has a corresponding soul or a corresponding individual person. Each one of these, the aristocrat, the timocrat, the oligarch, the democrat, and ultimately the tyrant, has someone who looks like this city, someone who acts like this city, someone whose soul or their mind or their life is structured like this.
For the final paper, this is the first option, correct?
Mhm. Yeah. Today we're discussing mostly the decline of the city. Thursday we're going to focus more on the decline of the soul. Next week we're hopefully going to get into what specifically is so bad about the last one in terms of the soul. Might get into that Thursday.
Does that form of democracy involve like people voting
Mhm.
for the rulers? And
Not for the rulers, for policy. This is direct democracy.
Right. And so that means that each policy is actually from the people, and so
Mhm.
each one of them.
This is a direct Athenian style democracy where someone brings up an issue in the assembly, so with everyone, any citizen is allowed to be there and allowed to vote, and then it's up for a vote, usually just up or down.
Right. So each person chooses what he or she thinks is right.
And not a lot gets done, obviously, not by the whole city.
So this would be before the time that anyone would ever like speak on behalf of like something that they were voting on.
Oh yeah, you
Like,
could.
You
You
could.
could. That's what opens the door, though.
Mm-hmm.
How does that open the door, and to what?
Because when people when someone's speaking on behalf of something, then people like what they have to say and like would tend to gravitate towards following them and their ideas. And that's how like one leader gets picked.
Yeah. So this is how we move into the tyranny. The tyranny is exactly like you said. A tyranny evolves from a democracy when one person, that person, the person who was useless in our previous societies, gets up and speaks before everybody and gets enough people to start voting their way. Start swaying people. Now, how do you do this? How do you sway people to say vote for you or agree with you?
Be like the loudest or maybe the strongest.
Be the loudest, be the strongest. Strongest in what sense?
I mean, it can be both ways. It could be in the physical sense where like if somebody doesn't agree with you, you beat them up, or like as in like the dialect version where
Bad solution.
you're a
Remember?
wordsmith. You can convince people with your words.
That's probably good. Now, being the strongest and being able to beat people up. Really bad short-term solution. Right. Generally, the tyrant isn't all that much stronger than anybody. They're not particularly good at anything in particular. What they're good at is getting people to listen to them. So the latter, right? This rhetorical strength, being able to convince people. What are they selling?
Like their perfect or their reality.
Like what?
You know, like I was agreeing with him where like they had like this charisma like Hitler and like Mussolini and all these guys.
Great example.
They knew how to like just get people to believe that what their plan was like it was gonna save everyone, but it was really just for their own sake.
Yeah, so what were some of the techniques that tyrants in the past have used? Take your Hitlers, your Mussolinis, your Stalins, your Pol Pots.
Just
your
propaganda.
propaganda to get people to think the same things that you do, right? A mockery of education. That's a good one. It's a good start.
They normally like pick an enemy to unite everybody against.
They pick an enemy, either internal or external, doesn't matter. That's important. Get someone to be afraid of or hate somebody else more than they're afraid of or hating the prospect of not getting what they want. That's a good element to it.
I don't know if it's just me, but I think that every dictator actually has some sort of intelligence,
Mhm.
but he or she uses it in the wrong direction.
Yeah, this person can't be dumb. Or tyrant can't be dumb.
Right.
You have to know what they're doing. So what do they? So in essence, what they're having to do is they're having to promise what everyone wants. And that doesn't mean promise the one thing that everyone wants. No. They promise you what you want, you what you want, you what you want, you what you want, etc. It's easy to do because these people are these are disunited, right? So the tyrant puts himself at the top of a nicely organized society. And it's organized pretty well by managers, by auxiliary equivalents, and by a bunch of producers. But instead of for the good of the city and the overall good, it's for the good of the tyrant. So, rule by one.
So he screws everyone else?
Yes.
That's
Rule
nice.
by one for the good of
For the sake of the ruler. Oh. I did want to have the screen on. Remind me. My favorite example of a tyrant in particularly modern times was the, what's his name? The current president of Venezuela. Anyone remember?
Oh,
It's not Chavez. It's not Chavez, it's the other guy. It's Maduro, yeah. Last year, around this time, around the time when his government was recommending that people eat rabbits, eat and raise pet rabbits to avoid, mass starvation, he went on and did a press conference about it, and mid-press conference took an empanada out of his desk and started eating.
What?
An empanada.
Same.
What is that?
It's food.
Oh yeah, it's a little fried dough pastry thing.
It's good. It's not
He had a snack in the middle of assuring his people that, oh no, it'll be fine, just eat your pet rabbits.
I'm gonna eat this then.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a snack.
When you should have like
I'll-
a rabbit.
I
on
will
this.
I will show you the video of this on Thursday. That'll be where we start, and then we'll start looking at what these are equivalent to, what kind of person each of these is equivalent to. So I will see everybody on Thursday. Good one. All right. So this where I wanted to start today. Where I wanted to start today is looking at an example of a tyrant in the modern day. And this follows the pattern that we were talking about last time of the tyrant finally being the person who is leading the city or leading the state for their own sake, rather than for the sake of the city itself. Great example. So for some context, this was last year. This was right around the time, this was actually like a week or two after this guy's government officially sent out a notice that one of the best ways to fight the famine that's sweeping the country is to breed and eat pet rabbits. Yeah, because everything else is gone and eaten. So this kind of shows some of his attitude towards the subject. This is in the middle of a news conference.
So what is he eating exactly?
An empanada, so a fried pastry thing with meat. Meat pastry. I don't know why they use it. It's a New York Post.
makes him more savage.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a little bit of the context. But you get the idea, right? So this is somebody who's not the least bit concerned with the welfare of his citizens.
I just like the search term. Venezuela president empanada.
Yeah. Searching for.
YouTube haiku.
Doesn't add up, but I could make it. We could make it work, but let's not. The point being, right, so this is the kind of person that leads a tyranny, which is the final stage of our society, according to Plato, before it completely dissolves. Because after this, what happens to a city, to a society, to any kind of state?
They try to overthrow the leader.
Okay. At that point, it can either turn back into some previous form, almost never an aristocracy, because the people who are best equipped to rule are either exiled, exterminated, or in no position to rule or to lead. So often it'll turn back to a democracy, and then we just flip back and forth between democracy and tyranny, and then back to a democracy, and then back to a tyranny. Or maybe it'll go to a military dictatorship, so something like a timocracy, maybe. Or maybe it'll just go to a different tyranny, because who is more equipped to take down a tyrant than another tyrant? Alternatively, what can happen is everything collapses. And society just disintegrates, either breaking up into pieces, being destroyed from the outside, or simply dissolving and reforming into some new society with a completely new system of organization. So this is the last step, truly. The last step before the society that we're talking about completely disappears. This is no longer a city. After the tyrant winds up being overthrown by some way, even if that's just dying naturally, which happened a few times in history, society collapses. It's gone. There's no city anymore. A new one can come up in the same place with the same materials, so the same people, maybe some of the same people. Or it can revert to a different tyrant or another flawed structure for a while, but ultimately, this is the end. It's over. Was that?
I was just saying, yeah, it goes back to collapsing again.
Yeah, right. Because what we've been looking at is the city slowly falling apart and dissolving. It's going from good to not as good to bad to worse to not there anymore, right? It's just like, here, let me...
Kind of like the fall of Rome. Almost.
Hang on. Here's another great time lapse. This is another good search term as well. It's like this is what's happening to the city. Let's leave this play for a little bit.
I can't see it. Can you?
Oh, you did, yeah.
Oh, nah, can you?
Yeah. That's what's happening to the city, right? It's going from pretty good city to start some imperfections start creeping in, and then the imperfections start taking over, and then it's not a city anymore. Just like our sandwich here is not a sandwich anymore at this point. That is a pile of trash.
It's like what I'd expect from someone.
That's
And they're literally like outside.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna officially judge. It's simply not that. It's not public. That's fine. That's uncontroversial in Florida. But yeah,
So, like, what happens to the people?
they can form a new city. They
Oh.
can simply leave because there's nothing left for them there. They can go and join up with other cities. They can be conquered, which is common enough because a tyrant can't manage the city well, especially not for the sake of the good of the city. The city is slowly crumbling underneath the tyrant, and so it's becoming less and less effective, less and less of a good city. So he can't defend it. He can't defend the city as effectively. He's more concerned with defending himself. And this especially you can see in any of the Roman emperors. Rome became less and less capable of defending itself. Not just too big, but the emperors were more concerned with themselves than they were concerned with Rome. Justinian is a good example of not a particularly terrible emperor by earlier standards at least. But the Eastern Roman Empire basically crumbled out from beneath him for a time. He managed to reform it a bit, but it crumbled out from beneath him because it had been so corrupted up until then. And so he couldn't keep the thing together.
So basically, people leave
People leave or die.
or die.
Right? So in the case of Venezuela, people are currently dying. That's a common enough thing that happens when a tyrant takes over, is that people start dying in huge numbers. Now, huge numbers in the ancient world were in the thousands. Huge numbers today are in the millions, but still, It's a lot of people dying from mismanagement, essentially. Yeah.
Could you apply this to like what's going on in Syria today?
Perhaps outside influence has more to do with that than say Venezuela or say the Roman Empire. I mean. But there may well be a similar rotting from the top kind of thing, right? So strongman takes over, starts leading for the sake of himself rather than for the sake of the country. The country starts to crumble. Now, outside influences between the U.S. and Russia are poking it and making it collapse faster, but there's a good chance it would happen anyway, given the circumstances. Although that's far more debatable than I would like to debate in class, but at least today. I'm not enough of an expert on the situation. But it could well be a pretty good example of this kind of thing. So someone takes over. The essential part is that it's for the sake of the leader. The leader's no longer concerned with leading the city. They're concerned with using the city for their own benefit. The early mad emperors of Rome are probably the best examples of this. Going back further than Justinian to Nero, to Caligula, to Tiberius. Those are the big ones. I'll talk a little bit more about Tiberius once we get to the tyrannical person. And we'll see how a person gets to this stage of moral degradation. The kind of person who would rule a city like this has to be a certain kind of person and has to be a particularly unjust kind of person. We can look at what that'll ultimately be like. Right. Okay. So, all right, how do we get there? So let's take each of our kinds of cities, and let's try and figure out what the equivalent person or the equivalent soul will look like. So we have the aristocrat. We have the Timocrat. We have the oligarch. The Democrat. And then finally we have the tyrant. And so just like Plato describes the ideal just city and the ideal just soul as being sort of parallel, right? As mapping onto one another allegorically. So the just city looks in important ways like the just soul. Each version will now bear similarities to its corresponding city. Right? Now, something to keep in mind, that doesn't necessarily mean that the leader of the aristocracy is what we're looking at to say what is the aristocratic person like. Similarly, we're not necessarily looking at what is the leader or common person in a democracy to see what is a democratic person like, or what does a democratic soul look like, etc. Right? So we're looking at what is the person or the soul whose structure is similar to the structure of the corresponding kind of city or kind of society. Okay, so what does the structure look like of our aristocrat, our aristocratic person, our perfectly just soul? Yes?
Is it like learning loving? What the soul's here towards?
That's true. So knowledge is important, is an important value, but it's probably not the utmost.
Are you talking about how the producers were appetite of soul and
Right.
The guardians were
This thing.
yeah.
So poorly drawn triangle. You remember why that has to be the case. Okay. We have these three parts. Go ahead. What are the
Yes.
three parts?
The guardians, the producers, and the auxiliaries.
Yep. So that's the parts of the city. So what's the corresponding soul look like?
The guardians are Reason.
Reason. So reason is in command, right? Reason is in control of the soul as a whole.
Auxiliaries are
Courageous.
courageous.
They are courageous, but it's not-
Spirited.
Spirit, right? The spirit or spirited part. Courage is the primary virtue here of this part. And then what are producers?
Appetite.
Appetites or desires. So appetites. Right. Okay. So reason is in charge. Reason directs the soul in general towards what?
The good.
Towards the good.
Yeah, the individual is, when all those things are in line, that's the good.
In its order towards the overall good. So whether that's the overall good of the community that they're in, whether that's the good in general, the soul not only has to be good in its own structure, but ordered as a whole towards some higher good. Right? The good of everything, the good of the particular scenario, the good of things above oneself. That's an important part of justice. So it has to be wise, courageous, moderate, and just. This possesses all of the virtues this person does. They are in control of themselves. There's an important element of self-control here. So reason has control over the passions of the spirit and the desires of the appetites. But it doesn't diminish them, right? Each part has a part to play. There are plenty of appetites present, and spirit is robust and powerful here. Spirit is what defends the self from outside threats and keeps the self coherent under the command of reason, of right reason. And then appetites are what supply the self with what we need, what we want as well, even. Right? So we don't want to here necessarily have reason say, no, we shouldn't have that. So maybe a sandwich is a bad example. So what's something you want right now? Ice cream, great. You want ice cream. Is that a good thing to have right now?
Yeah.
So why aren't you going to get ice cream?
Because I'm here.
Right. Exactly. That is a good answer, right? You've organized your priorities. You're here now, and you can think, well, you know what? Afterwards, I should go out and get ice cream because that's a good thing, and that's something I want, and that wouldn't be detrimental to me. Yeah, maybe it would like too much ice cream, so you have to be careful with that. Maybe it would be if you did this every day after class. That might be a little dangerous, but you haven't had ice cream every day after class this week. It'd be something to go do. Something good to go do, right? Something that is overall beneficial. It is an appetite that is correctly ordered towards the whole. So that's not something that reason should say, no, this isn't something I should do. All right, suppose you're on a diet. Reason has determined that you need to lose weight. What is it going to say about having ice cream after class?
It's not a good thing to do.
Right. Not a good thing to do. Because it isn't good for the whole. That is a particular appetite that we should say no to. Okay, what is spirit's role in this? What's the role of passion in this?
We're still an example.
Yeah, you're still on a diet, you still want ice cream. And your reason has still said, I should be on a diet. What's spirit doing?
Holding you back from eating ice cream.
Yeah. How might you do that?
Just avoid it. Just don't go buy any ice cream parlors. Just drive straight home, drink some milk.
That's hard. Take a cold shower. I don't know how much you want ice cream, guys. Right, but there might be an issue here, because that's reason saying, no, I will not have ice cream, and that's reason trying to do spirit's job. What's a good role for passion here? Yeah?
Maybe like knowing why you're on the diet, like remembering like the outcome of it.
Yeah, like think about, you know what? I'm getting ready for summer. I want to look good. I want to not die of a heart attack in the next 5 years.
Everybody's a beach bum.
Yeah, but that's just crushing the spirit. Really, I mean, unless you've rationally determined that no, I'm actually doing okay, and I really don't need to be on a diet. And that appetite I have to be thinner is not healthy, right? It's not good for the entirety. Then yeah, sure, Indulge the ice cream. Nothing wrong with that. But if reason has determined, hey, I really should lose some weight, ice cream is not conducive to me losing weight, spirit can say, you know what, I want to be a healthy person. This is who I want to be. And this is the kind of thing that I want to do. So you can enforce this command from reason on appetites. What's another way you can do it? Anybody else had to like keep yourself on a diet? Has this ever happened? Yeah?
Yeah.
So how? In addition to just saying, yeah, I want to be fit, I want to look good for the summer or whatever. What's another way you can go about this? Using passion or spirit to enforce the diet on yourself.
I mean, I just thought about like the consequences, like the negative effects of
Yeah, so I don't want these negative effects. I don't want to die. I don't want to be unhealthy. I want to be able to, walk upstairs.
Taking it too far.
Well, what if you're
Depends how much ice cream.
preparing for a role or something?
Yeah, right. So that's something else, right? So you can have other reasons, right? Reason can say, yeah, I have this other reason to suppress or indulge this particular appetite.
So what can the passion be? Because if you're on a diet, you clearly have to exercise. So you can exercise more, or do a little bit harder, so it'll reinforce your diet once you.
Yeah, and that's hard to do, especially if you're just doing it rationally. You're saying, I must continue running. No one runs like that. You push through it, right? You're a runner.
Could it be someone? Yeah, of course. Could it be someone you look up to? Like that would be
Yeah.
a spirit, like a passion thing. Like I'm
That's true.
passionate about like.
I want to be like this person.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Could it be like encouragement from like, I guess the person you look up to?
Yeah, so listening to other people as well, that can also encourage, and the word courage is even in there, right? That's important. It encourages us to restrain these particular appetites. So I have to assume everyone has a fairly healthy self-image, because no one brought up the idea of looking in a mirror. Right? Look at yourself. You look disgusting. You don't want to be this anymore. Get better. No one's had to do this to yourself, really? No one had that impetus to go on a diet. Okay, a little, maybe. That's probably for the best. I mean, this is kind of a last resort in terms of passion, but this can be a good thing, right? It gets you to do what you need to do, what you've already rationally determined is the right thing to do. Then go for it. Right? My point here is that passion or spirit can be reaching towards something we want or pushing away something we don't want. So this is that twofold part of what auxiliaries do. Because auxiliaries, one, they defend the city from outside threats. They don't let the threat in. That's like looking in the mirror and saying, oh God, I'm disgusting. I shouldn't do this. Keep this ice cream out of here. On the other hand, the auxiliaries can enforce the commands of the guardians internally and say, here's what we want to be. We want the city to be this way, and we're going to do it. Same goes for spirit. Ultimately, it's directed towards the good, which is transcendent of just the person. Okay. So what about the Timocrat? The Timocratic person. Remember, they look like the Timocratic City in some way, which is ruled by military.
So the spirit rules that person.
Yes. So
That means they get pulled in all kinds of different directions.
the spirit rules. It uses reason to manage. And then it rules over appetites. What's the highest value for this kind of person?
Passion.
Yeah. Honor. Honor and reputation.
What does appetite do?
Appetite still provides for what's needed, but to a lesser degree. Right? So this is the person who, every time they see themselves in the mirror, say, I look awful. I need to get in shape.
Do you think it would be more of a war-based city? Because, I
Yeah.
mean, if you have a lot of spirit, then he has, like,
pride. Like he has like huge pride.
Yeah, so this is, as a city, the Timocratic City, he's very warlike. And this transitions over to the Timocratic Person. This is the kind of person who, if you encounter them in a bar and you say something rude about their mother, is definitely going to punch you. Right? Now, not necessarily. This also could be the person who, if you threaten them, is definitely going to run away from you.
Wait, how?
Whoa.
Because
Why is that?
they're going to defend themselves. They're going to run away from whatever opposes them.
Right.
They're going to run towards it.
Right. They're going to avoid harm to themselves, especially harm to their honor and their reputation. Whether that means lashing out against you or that means avoiding you, they're going to do it. So if this means that this kind of person says, no, I'm not gonna get into this with you, and I'm going to leave, right? So there's three, roughly speaking, if you're at a bar and you insult people and you insult somebody, there's three ways they can respond to it. One, they can punch you. Two, they can say, oh, and just kind of roll with it. Or three, they can get up and leave. Right? This kind of person either punches you or gets up and leaves. There's no in between. They're completely ruled by passion. They either want to get out of the situation or they want to fight it. And they use reason here. Reason still has a place because reason is going to determine which one. Right? How are they going to do this? Can they take you or not? Right? And remember, the Timocratic City, what's happening to the producers?
They're having to produce more. Or they're having to produce different things.
They're having to produce different things, less for themselves. So what's going on here is the spirit is in charge, right? Passion is in charge. It's using reason to determine what appetites should be fulfilled for the sake of my honor, glory, reputation, well-being, what have you. Well-being in the very narrow sense of protecting myself and protecting my reputation or protecting a few things that I might care about. So appetites here tend to get suppressed. At least some of them. Some of them, on the other hand, tend to get inflamed. This person is much more likely to say no to the ice cream and say yes to the gym. Right? This is somebody who has certain appetites that are very strongly directed towards the uses of their passion, not so much directed towards anything else. Now, something else to note. Passion here, spirit, this can be things other than simply, physically fighting. This can be somebody who, trains their mind, gets very good at arguing. A sophist can perfectly well look like this. Somebody who can defend themselves very well in a different context and focuses on that. Not so much concerned with being correct, more concerned with, you're not going to prove me wrong. What's fine?
You think about people like that, and you can almost immediately think of one person.
Yeah.
Everyone has that one person in their life. They're like, I know that person.
Yeah, absolutely. Some more. That'll probably be the case for each of these, by the way. Just saying.
Write that person's name on the quiz.
So that may actually be a quiz question. Will be, what's an example of one of these or a couple of these? And then you'll need to kind of explain why your mom is a good example of democratic.
Send you a video for yelling.
I mean, it's not a good partial credit. All right. So we get the idea of what a Timocrat is like. This is the passionate person. This is the person who pursues what they've chosen to pursue, regardless of whether it's the best thing to pursue. Come hell or high water, and everything is ordered towards that. Yeah.
So is it safe to say that they believe in things that are more morally right?
Not necessarily. You can have a very passionate person who's just wrong about what right things are, what the right thing to do is. Pick someone you disagree with politically. Right? If they're very passionate about it, let me just say, if they're in politics, they're probably this kind of person. or a tyrant. Some of them might be oligarchs, but we'll see why. Generally, though, it's Timocrats and tyrants in politics. People who are incredibly passionate about a single thing and will pursue it to no end at the expense of everything else. And will use reason to figure out how to get there. They're not using reason to kind of figure out what to get to. Question?
So these are the people that move the city towards the auxiliaries being in charge.
Probably. But like I said, we don't necessarily want to envision this as saying, all right, the people who look like this are the ones who are in charge of the aristocracy, people who look like this are in charge of the democracy. It's not necessarily the case. There can perfectly well be well-rounded, properly aristocratic people who happen to be in the military when the military takes over and they become, the leaders of the city. It's just they don't have the expertise to rule. Similarly, you can have somebody of any of these sorts that happens to be in a position of leadership. Maybe they won't quite be dispositionally suited so much, but there isn't this necessary connection, right? So not everyone leading the Timocratic City is a Timocratic person. Maybe there tends to be, right? So maybe there's a propensity to be this kind of a person in this kind of a city, but it's certainly not absolute, and it's certainly not an absolute connection to leadership either. The closest you'll find there is aristocratic, because that's perfectly just and perfectly just. And then democratic, because everyone is pulled in every possible direction. Well, even that's a bit of a stretch. But everyone's pulled in every possible direction, and the city is pulled in every possible direction. Something like that. Tyrant, probably. It's tough, though. I say tyrant is difficult to say because not everyone who is a tyrannical person, not everyone who has a tyrannical soul, actually achieves anything like power. There's plenty of people who are what we would call utter psychopaths, who, thank God, never touch the reins of power. Right? But we'll take a look at that once we collapse into it. Anything else about these two? What about the oligarch? If we recall, the oligarchic city is the one most concerned with money, the most concerned with necessary goods.
So
Appetites are in control. Actually, move this down a little bit. And then spirit and reason are beneath. They're still there, they're still advising, but they're not in command, right? They don't get to decide what to do. If you recall, the producers are somewhat divided between rich and poor. Yeah?
Is the spirit and the reason, are they equal?
More or less. Neither of them are particularly important, but they're both in the service of, well, the rich is what it is in the city, but I don't want to quite spoil what it is. So, yeah.
To the same extent?
Yeah. Neither one is particularly in charge here. So if we recall in the city, the producers are sort of stratified between rich and poor. So the rich are in charge and the poor are underneath them, wielding a lot less power. If you recall, we also have two different kinds of appetites. Which one do you think is in charge?
The desires.
What kind of desires? There's two kinds of desires.
Money, prostitution.
Those are two different kinds of desires. Let's fit into two different categories.
Okay.
Interestingly enough.
Is it like necessary and unnecessary?
Yep. So necessary desires, unnecessary desires, right? Desires for things we need, desires for things we want. Necessities and luxuries. Which desires are in control?
The
luxuries.
Like the luxuries.
You'd think so, but no. No, necessary desires are in charge. Or
Those are the
necessary-
richest?
What's that?
Those are the richest? The
Yeah.
people who...
Necessary desires are the equivalent to the rich. They're the people who are producing how they're able to the city. But in the soul, we're talking about, in particular, necessary appetites, things that we actually need, right? And that takes precedent here over things that we merely want or mere luxuries. So what do you think is the highest value for the oligarch?
What do you mean by
Personal gain,
What kind of personal gain? Gain of what?
specifically like, I don't know, monetary.
Maybe. Maybe. But not necessarily. Because remember, money is always instrumentally good. It's only good for the sake of something else. It can't be its own highest value unless you're thoroughly disordered.
Money for the sake of self-preservation, though, I mean, is their biggest thing.
Yeah. So, something like security or necessary appetites. Necessary
I
desires.
understand your question now.
So what's the thing that they value the most? What are they after? Like this person is most concerned with protecting their honor and reputation.
Right.
This person is most concerned with pursuing the good, doing what's right. This person is most concerned with their own necessities and their own security. So what does this person look like? What do they act like? What does the oligarch like?
Very proud, snobby, fat.
Not necessarily fat. Not necessarily fat.
So it's not like one of those people that you see like in the, back in the, Greek Empire where they were, just completely obese and they would sit on like some sort of like table or something.
Yeah, so sitting there and being fed
Literally
grapes.
Jabba the Hutt.
They're just-
No,
yeah.
actually, funny enough, you would think, right? You would totally think that this kind of person looks like that, right?
Littlefinger.
They're
Oh, yeah.
It's Littlefinger.
Littlefinger, but it's not. It's really not. It's more. If we're going to Game of Thrones, it's more like.
Seriously.
No. More like, what's her father's name? Cersei's father.
Oh,
Tywin.
Tyrant.
More like Tywin. Funny enough. Something else on that?
I was gonna say they're probably miserly, like
Yes.
saving.
Yeah.
So what?
They're miserly. They're saving. They're
That's
more
also-
concerned with their own security.
Yeah, it's Han
Alright.
all day.
What's that?
It's Han Solo all day.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
Han
not
Solo
really-
wants to make sure that he can pay off Jabba the Hutt. He wants to make it out of the situation alive. And he's not so concerned with big causes and things. I mean, until he is, but that's kind of a shift in personality.
Hockey Jedi magic.
Yeah. Less of the hokey Jedi magic and more of I got mine. I'm all set where I'm at. I don't need to worry about getting more stuff beyond what I need, but I need to worry about keeping what I've got. Yeah.
Do they value prosperity too, or are they more like in the present focus?
Yes. Well, okay. So prosperity depends what you mean. So long term.
Long-term
Yes.
gain.
Absolutely. These people have what we would call low time preference. So time preference is an economic term for how much you value getting something now rather than deferring what you get. They have very low time preference. In other words, as long as they can get something long term, they'll go for that.
Mhm.
They plan. They don't want the future to be uncertain. They want to make sure that they're going to do all right at some point, as far down the line as they can manage. Anybody have somebody like this in mind?
Yeah.
Yeah? You get great examples, apparently. Like who? What's,
I like that I know personally.
or can think of, it doesn't have to be personally, it's going to be a famous person, it's going to be characters, whatever. Or personally, for all I care, you can talk about somebody if you're comfortable talking about them.
No, I don't know. It's like, to me, that's like the kind of person that you can't rely on for anything, and like as soon as you need them for something, if it doesn't align with exactly what they want, they're just gonna wiggle their way out.
Probably, although, keep in mind, other people's loyalty is a valuable commodity.
Yeah. They'll use you when they need you, but not when you need them back. It's like, I don't
Unless they think that,
Yeah.
doing you a favor will secure them a favor in the long run.
As an artist, that's like most people I encounter.
You see you as a benefit.
Get a bunch, no, don't worry, I can't pay you right now.
Exposure. I've got the exposure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Please exposure.
Because they don't need you next time. They can ask somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
They can con somebody else out of work.
They can
Right?
gladly give someone else exposure.
Right.
not bitter.
Sure. Every artist is bitter about that, don't I? I know plenty of artistic types, and they're all furious whenever I say the word exposure. It's great.
Exposure I want.
At one point, I even managed to get an accountant angry at me for saying something like that.
I wonder who that was.
Anyway, that aside, right? So the point is that this person is we're looking at for number one, basically. But they're not doing it in an underhanded way. They're not out to get other people. They're just looking out for their own interests, their own concerns. If we're looking at Book 1 of the Republic, we have Socrates. Who do we have here? Paul Marcus. So he was the son. He was the one who's, what was his definition of justice again?
To each their own, or render each to do.
Nope. Well, that was,
That's
he was going based off of
friends and harm enemies.
do good to friends and harm to enemies, right? So do good to people who are good to you, right, who help you out, and then harm people who would harm you. It's a very self-defensive way of thinking about things. All right, what about the oligarch? Who's that? Yeah, capitalist. The dad, right? Pay off your debts, tell the truth. Don't do anything underhanded. Make sure that you're secure in yourself. He's an old wealthy man who's managed his money quite well. If you recall, he talks about his grandfather had a big fortune. His father wasted all of it, and you get some notes of deep disrespect about that. And then he made about half of it back. So he's managed his money pretty well. He's managed to make it through life doing pretty well for himself. He's managed a good amount of personal security for himself and even for his son. What's his biggest concern? Why does he think telling the truth and paying your debts is so important at this point in life?
Keeps them safe.
From what?
Other people.
Well, from other people, and
I mean,
remember, he's old. What's coming up?
death.
Yeah, right. So he's concerned about potentially the afterlife.
You can't bargain with the afterlife.
Yeah, you can't be sure. So you got to make sure that you're secure and you're all set, ready to go. You don't have to worry about it. Not having to worry about it is this guy's major concern. You get the impression of the 1950s suburban family here, right? Kind of. Yep, we're all set. We've got enough money saved up just in case anything goes wrong, and they're very risk averse.
Like a Fallout bunker.
Yeah, right? You definitely bought that place in the Fallout bunker. Yeah. This is the person who has an insurance policy for everything.
You can't just call me out like that.
I can. I have.
Warranty for every device.
Yeah. Right. Actually, yeah. So if you've bought anything electronic recently, it probably came with a warranty card. This person doesn't have any of those sitting around or in the trash like we all do. Right? Be honest. Or maybe you are this person. And I'll point out this isn't awful. Right? There's still good things about this, right? This person is still safe, still secure in themselves, still able to do good things, still not at war with themselves, still not in any great level of internal distress or in major conflict with people, so I'm still doing okay. Right? A little worse off than the Timocrat, the person who's concerned with their honor and reputation, and will do anything to make sure that they're in the right. Because this is the kind of person that you can reason with. You can say, well, isn't that kind of like nasty and underhanded? You probably don't want to do that. And they'll probably listen. Right? And they'll probably do the right thing if you appeal to them in the right way. This person will probably do the right thing if you make it in their best interest. It's a step down. This person will just do the right thing, assuming they've got the right idea. Okay. Something else to note here is that the oligarch is very likely to suppress unnecessary desires. This is the kind of person who is so concerned with necessary desires that they will say no to things like luxuries. This isn't the kind of person who is swimming in gold coins. This is the person who has them locked away nicely in a safe.
The one that uses it.
What's that?
He just sees it piled up. I think go and just pile up and I use it.
Yeah, actually, yes. That's, I mean, taken to the utmost extreme, this is the person who lives in a little one-bedroom apartment
Eating ramen.
with a bunch of locks on the door, eating maybe not ramen, but eating like
Chicken breast with a vegetable and a potato.
yeah, like chicken breast, a chicken breast,
One
a
vegetable?
couple of heads of broccoli. This is the person that reseals the frozen vegetable bags. No, you make all of it and you eat like a human, like an aristocrat. That is an appetite that one should encourage. Anyway, point being that these the unnecessary appetites. This is not the person who's going to spend extra money on fine things. This is the person who's going to put that extra money in the bank or away in investments until they need it. All in all, not awful, but their priorities are a little twisty, not quite right. Because there are good things they will not do, even if they should. Because, well, maybe I shouldn't risk it. Speaking autobiographically for a moment, maybe I shouldn't get a new car. Maybe I should just save up money until I know I need to get a new car, even though I really ought to have a car. We can get away with having one car as a family instead of each having a car, like responsible adults. Side note: this is great for self-reflection. Just wait till we get to democratic. This is like the thing that will feel like I'm attacking you. So what? All right, let's get to it. What is the democratic person like? Did you have a question?
I was just gonna say for the one we're talking about, is it like the kind of person that would buy a Prius instead of a BMW?
Priuses are expensive.
Whoa.
Priuses are expensive. And they're hard to upkeep. This is the person who will buy, like,
Toyota Camry.
yeah, like a used Toyota Camry.
But that's smart though. That's
It
the
is.
right decision.
Maybe.
So if it's a 2009 Toyota Camry that has less miles, and you're paying like $125 for a car note, and you're paying like $280 for insurance.
See, here's the other
You can
thing.
keep
Also,
up
like,
with the payments. Then if it breaks down,
maybe I'm a little bit too much in here as well because I'm committed to not buying a car I can't pay cash for. So I'm looking like 2009. That's a little new for my budget.
Your budget is like this to begin with.
You should see my bank account. I'm not going to share it. But you should get it.
But isn't it that do they have the money to do that? Like,
Yeah.
Is it like they
Yeah.
have the money but they choose not to because
Yeah, this is a person who
Okay.
could perfectly well
Like on the
afford to
safe
buy
they can
a
afford
nice
it?
new
Like
car,
really,
but
really
no.
safe side.
that's the person that says they're broke but they got money.
That's the dark side of it, right? That's the kind of dark side of this. That's the kind of dark side of this. That's the person who goes out to eat and says, instead of that 20% tip, I really shouldn't be spending too much money. And they go with like 5 or 10%. Like, no, it's all right. It's no big deal.
I hate this. people.
Or you need a favor, and they're like, oh well, no, I can't really. Money's a little tight. Now. Yeah, I get. Yeah. Person who.
Wait, I've got gas?
The person who's got a brand new car and still asks you for gas money. We know that person. It's that kind of thing. It's that kind of thing. It's the kind of thing that where they're stingy, but not for the sake of just having a bunch of stuff. They're stingy because stay on the safe side, just in case. More concerned about security, safety, stability, than about extravagance, than about, fulfilling desires, getting what they want. All right, Any other questions here? We started insulting people with democracy.
Alright, I'm ready to
All right,
go.
what does a democratic soul look like?
It's just like a blob.
It is like a blob.
No specific
There's the blob.
direction.
No specific direction.
Long for the ride.
No specific direction. So what's in charge?
It could be like a mix of all three.
All
Like,
three, yeah.
depends
Kind of.
on your mood.
But it really can't be reason that's in charge, because reason isn't all that strong on its own.
Because that's a triangle, that's a circle.
Yeah. Circles aren't all that stable. You think there are so many pyramids built in the ancient world and not many spherical buildings built in the ancient world. There's a reason for that, and it isn't aliens. Spirit's probably not going to be in control either, because spirit is, well, it doesn't have that much control if it doesn't have the direction of reason to guide it. And it's only a small part of yourself. Sure, it can be useful to things, but it's not going to be in command in something like this. Same with necessary appetites. It's difficult to choose to not buy the new car if you can afford it. It's difficult to choose not to go with, let's say, not to make it large, make it a large instead of a medium. Didn't want to go there, but.
So would it
But
be
it's true. Mm-hmm.
the poor producers?
Yeah. So in the city, it's mostly the poor that are in control, just
So
because it's
the
the
lo-
most of them. So what is that in the soul?
Appetite of, but the people who, the luxury. Or
So luxuries, unnecessary appetites. And no single one of them. What is the highest value for a democratic person? What do they value over anything else?
money.
Maybe money.
Not money because they're poor.
Not necessarily.
Justice?
So remember again, right? It's not necessarily that the people in charge of the city are like this person. Besides, ask a poor person, what do they want? Money? Ask me, right? I could use money.
Me too.
Yeah. Most people could use money. Money is actually pretty important. It's also pretty important to a democratic person. Maybe it's not the highest value though. What is? What's the highest value?
Like, they just want people to listen to them?
Maybe. Not necessarily though. What do they get from
The
that?
highest value is themselves, right?
Themselves. What do you mean?
Like, as an intrinsic good.
Happiness. Well, all of these think they're aiming at happiness. As it turns out, Plato will argue that only the aristocrat actually gets to it, or gets close to it. It's not quite.
Personal satisfaction.
Yeah. Yep. Satisfaction. Or a current desires. In other words, what I want right now. And this is constantly shifting because we all have lots of different desires. We all want lots of different things. And what we want at the moment changes from moment to moment. Who do you, out of all of you, raise your hand if you think you have gone the least amount of time out of everybody in this class, the least amount of time between buying something and regretting the purchase.
Oh, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, who can beat it? How long? Between buying something and regretting the purchase. Well, you think about it, how long?
Like a major purchase?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Any purchase between buying it and regretting it.
Before you even made
I was
the
gonna say
purchase.
before I even made it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's impressive.
Like,
Tell us a
lie.
story. That's exactly what I'm talking about, but tell us. Yeah.
Oh, like,
Please work.
like, I think Starbucks is the devil, but I'm like so addicted.
Yeah, you know,
yeah.
you want it. You really want
I
that
really
Starbucks
want it.
coffee, but you really don't want to go to Starbucks, and you do though.
And I really don't want to spend the money.
Yeah, that's true.
$5
but
coffee.
I'm in the line. I'm like, I don't want this. Yeah.
Yep.
I have a good example. For females, it's like at the nail salon.
Like you're already there, like getting your nails done, and then in your hair you're like, dang, like I just like walk up and leave type thing. But you can't because like you're already there.
You're already there. You've already committed.
Yeah.
It's like McDonald's.
Yeah.
Like, geez, sometimes I'm.
You're there.
Like, damn.
You're in line. You're like, I really don't want anything
broke.
here.
Why
God, I really shouldn't be eating McDonald's. I really don't even want this. This just looks awful. How about number 4?
Large fries, absolutely, thank you.
Yeah. That's what this is. This is the person who wants lots and lots of different things, most of which conflict with one another at various different moments, probably at the same time,
And they
can
won't
never
get it.
decide on it, and try to pursue all of them. In other words, it's probably you at least part of the time. Because it's me at least part of the time.
So it's the half-assed version of everything.
Kind of. I would say more the Times Square version of everything. The 30,000 advertisements, like 20,000 of which you want to purchase right now. Right? All of which you acknowledge that, yeah, I really shouldn't be affording that, but, I'll just splurge this time. You've said those words. That's the democratic soul. That is the democratic person. This is the person who is constantly swayed by different things. Generally led by satisfaction. What I want right now, go ahead and go for it. The person who generally has no overall direction, but is just sort of directed by what they happen to want. This is where things start going really wrong. Because what happens when you say you want something you don't need, and you get it?
Greedy.
What's an example? Something that you wanted, didn't need, but got recently or not recently.
A new phone.
Awesome. You didn't need a new phone, but you got one. How do you feel about your phone?
Horrible.
That's right.
But now I'm getting over it.
You're getting over it. By which I'm assuming you mean you're probably going to do the exact same thing in a couple of months.
At least she's honest.
It takes
Right.
years to like.
Okay, well, maybe a year.
2 years.
Maybe.
When the time is up.
Okay.
Stuck in that contract.
Well,
Yeah.
true. Like I said, I have a little too much of this in me. I had the same phone for almost 4 years.
What type of phone
Which
is it?
one?
It wasn't that one. It was an S3, Galaxy S3, I think. Might have been 2. I did an S2 even. That's a 6. Still works. I don't have a problem with it.
But how slow is it?
It's fine. I take care of it.
You can still call and text somebody.
It's got full 4G network. It's not like it's slow. I take all of the crapware off of it. It's not. It works. I take care of my thing, so I don't have to do the democratic thing. Buy the next thing, even though I do sometimes. For example, any kind of advertising, any kind of sales depends on this. Depends on people having at least an element of this within them, or probably this being, roughly speaking, what they're like overall. Have you ever, for instance, saved money on something that you wouldn't have bought?
No, because that's not saving money.
That's right. But have you done it?
No.
No. Maybe you're smart.
Maybe.
Maybe you're smart. I'm not.
I save money to buy something.
Yeah, that's overall a good thing. But the point is, though, especially the point I was bringing up, especially with the phone example, when you want something, you really do want it. It really is something that it is a good thing that you want to have it, right? It will help you in some way, even if it's minor and maybe you're overblowing it in your mind. Yeah, it's a good thing to pursue. But then once you get it, then how do you feel about it? You want the next thing. You want the next thing. Which is, I'll note, harder to get because you just spent a bunch of either time, effort, and or money on the last thing that you wanted, but don't really want anymore. So each next thing is going to be pursued and pursued and pursued, then abandoned. Then the next thing gets pursued and then abandoned, and then pursued and then abandoned.
Okay.
Seek help.
This is a crack.
This is above my pay grade. In any case, right? the point of this, the biggest problem here, is that they're seeking satisfaction and will never find it. Because they're seeking satisfaction in particular desires, and those particular desires are always going to be counteracted by other particular desires. Desires are pulling in every direction. There's nothing to kind of unite them together. Whereas, say, the aristocrat, or even the timocrat, or probably, well, the oligarch to a smaller degree, even the other kinds will have some kind of satisfaction because desires generally do get satisfied, especially for the aristocrat, so long as they're fulfilled in the right way, to the right degree, and ordered towards the good of the whole. But still, most desires get fulfilled, right? It is good to have a new phone at some point, and the aristocrat will buy a new phone when it's appropriate to do so. The aristocrat will have ice cream at some point when it's appropriate to do so. Democrat will, tell you what, great example. Who's been to Coisy? I probably talked about this.
Yeah.
Great. We'll go, and then partway through, be just muttering, "Oh God, I hate myself." It's still eating. It's still ordering more. Right? If you haven't done this, you haven't done Coisy properly, I don't think. But it is all-you-can-eat type places are perfect for this.
You have no choice, because what if you don't eat the rest of the day? You gotta pay, so you might as well just eat till like you're full.
Yo, take a nap.
You get what I'm saying? Take a nap, wake back up in the place, eat some
To
more.
be fair, I have
That one.
I have stayed at a Chinese buffet until I was asked to leave. Stop. After, so we were. This was a few years ago. This was when I was an undergrad, and a few friends of mine were working on something. We went to some. This was when the one by Target was still open. If you know what that was. We went there. We were there for like 8 hours.
Oh, yeah.
After like hour 4 or 5, they stopped bringing us drinks. Eventually, they're like, "Okay, please leave." Gonna have to ask you to either leave or pay for dinner. Yeah. We're working.
Hey, so we can do that in the hub every Thursday night, so it's not that far off.
That's what the dining halls here are designed for.
Yeah.
In any case, right? But you see the point, right? You see the point I'm trying to get at here is this idea of wanting something, but then not really wanting it ultimately, and then wanting something else. Okay, you want something else, and then you go for that, and then, well, okay, whatever. And then you go for something else, and you're pulled in every possible direction. You can't decide what you ultimately want. So ultimately, you don't actually get what you're pursuing, satisfaction, or satisfying your desires. And you can't even organize yourself to fulfill the desires that are hard to get to. Suppose you want a new car. Are you going to get it if you go out to eat whenever you happen to want to? Desires are in conflict, fundamentally. If you have something to direct all of them towards, you can organize them. If you don't, if you're going off of what do I want, and that's it, you're not going to be able to get much accomplished. It's similar to the Democratic City in that each individual person wants something. They have a primary thing they're aiming towards. And they're trying to get the entire city to back them in it, but they can't do it. So they're having to compromise, and they're having to settle on, so to speak, the appetizer platter. You know, this is going to Applebee's and ordering the appetizer platter for yourself. Questions here before we transition into minnows? Is anyone familiar with Emperor Tiberius? Emperor Tiberius Caesar, the third emperor of Rome? Yeah?
No.
No. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about him a bit. And we're going to have to figure out how the hell he got to the point where he got to. Not just Tiberius, but other emperors as well. But I think he's a great example. Because he did things that were effectively unthinkable by anyone else. Unthinkable by most of us as well. But he went all for it. I'm going to hold off to say exactly what. For now, what is the tyrant structured like? What's in charge?
Again, the appetites.
What kind of appetites?
Selfish or personal appetites?
Yes, selfish appetites. Plato calls unnatural appetites. And it is structured in a fairly organized way. Now we might say unnatural, another way of saying this might be self-destructive. Appetites. What's the highest value for a person like this?
Probably themselves.
Themselves.
Or we might say power. The ability to get whatever it is that they want. Okay. So what happens when you're a democratic person? A person with all sorts of desires, pulling in every various direction, all sorts of directions, pulling every which way, and then you win the lottery.
It's all for me.
Yeah, but what? What do you do with
You
it?
have to decide of one thing first.
Maybe.
Or
Not if you're
just
really
buy
good
all
at
the
it.
things.
Yeah, you buy everything, right? What if you win the lottery and it's like the jackpot? What if it's like $400 billion or something?
It depends on it depends what you
Okay, fine. You still get $200 billion. It
It's
doesn't
not
matter.
400 billion.
I mean,
Okay, so first of all, that happens,
Come on, man.
right? That happens.
200 billion is not 400.
You get 200 billion and you say, this isn't 400 billion. I thought I was going to win 400 billion.
What would you do if
Half of
One,
it is like
you
taxes.
immediately get resentful.
you can do a lot with 400.
It's true. You can do a lot with 200 billion, but you can do twice that with 400.
I can buy you a cell phone.
Now, all right, hold on. Something to note.
Like a
You
layer.
here's something to pay attention to. You probably can't do twice as much with 400 billion than you can with 200 billion, because most of us, if we were handed 200 billion dollars, would be dead really quickly.
Hell yeah. I would.
I wouldn't. I
That
would
would
pay
be
for
awesome.
security.
Then not because people would kill you, because you'd kill yourself.
It'll be a blaze of glory.
Yeah. Because think about it. All right.
Buy an island.
Especially if you're this kind of person who has desires of random, ever growing things. You want this, you want that, you want everything around you, everything that you can think of wanting, you want it. Then suddenly you can get it.
Those
How long
people
until
have to
you
come
die?
Together, right?
You
Those two
Lord
people can't
God.
be that separate.
Yeah.
Like the democratic soul and the tyrannical soul can't be that separate.
It's a very smooth transition.
Yeah, it must be like a line that's like maybe that wide.
So there's two ways this can happen. One, that person like this is capable of getting whatever it is that they want. Because they want this, they want that, they want everything else. Something happens. Yeah.
But I feel like he can move to the oligarch though, because he's still in the middle. Like if I have 400 billion, I'm gonna invest it, make some more money to get like 600 billion, then invest it in the community, huh? Because it's like I don't want all that money. Like I want to put my dogs on, I want to put people on,
Okay.
so they can make
So-
the same money.
Let me just say, maybe that means that you're a better person than this. That's entirely possible, and I'm not going to discount that. So if it is true, good on you. But I would very carefully consider whether you really think that's the case. I said this earlier in this class. Everyone in here would probably have made a fantastic guard at Auschwitz.
What?
A what?
A good
Guard at Auschwitz. Any one of us would probably have been able to be manipulated in some way to do terrible, awful things. One of the best ways of manipulating someone is to give them what they want. Now, raise your hand if you want $200 billion.
Everyone should
You
raise
also
their
got a
hand.
volume.
Right? I'd like to not raise my hand because I recognize that that's incredibly dangerous. However,
Human beings need money. It's a thing you live with.
it's helpful. It really is a genuinely good thing. But the
Yeah.
problem is, you want lots and lots of things, and then you can get it. You can actually satisfy all of those opposed desires. One of two things happens. One, you find that your desires are innately contradictory. You have opposite desires that you cannot fulfill both, even with unlimited means. Then you have to decide. Then you start shoving desires aside, and you start refocusing. And you start refocusing on a few narrow things. And chances are, those few narrow things are not going to turn you immediately into an aristocrat, because that takes moral virtue and training. It's going to turn you into someone who's led by just a few narrow appetites. So either an oligarch or a tyrant. Alternatively, you can actually satisfy all of your desires. Then what? Suppose you satisfy all of your desires with $10 billion. You have $190 billion left. What do you do?
Put it in the bank just in case.
Really though?
No.
Or give it to somebody in need. Like I would just give it to people who need it,
Maybe.
and then they will have to go through a whole interview process because they have to use it the right way. You know.
So you set up a fund. Okay, maybe. But realistically, most people will start wanting new things. Things that you hadn't thought to want before, right? Because this happens to us, right? When you get something that you wanted, the next step is wanting something else. When you've exhausted all the possibilities of things that you would probably have wanted, you start wanting things like, well, things like Tiberius wanted. So Tiberius was the first in the Roman Empire, Roman emperors to have something like absolute power. He took basically all of the power, well, his father had taken most of the power away from the Senate, the Roman Senate. He took basically the rest of it away and ruled as an autocrat. He had, practically speaking, unlimited power. And so, he used it extravagantly. He built a palace on the island of Capri, right near Rome. And eventually, as he got all of the things that he wanted, and he obtained everything that he could for his empire, so even doing some good things, eventually he ran out of things to want. But here's the problem. You never run out of things to want. You just start wanting things that you hadn't thought of before. And if you...
Example of that?
Yeah, minnows.
What's that?
You want to know? I don't care if you want to know. You're going to find out. So Tiberius would depends on how you want to say it. He would either kidnap, buy, rent, or just threaten away the children of rich senators and nobility, bring them to his island of Capri, and he would sit in the pool essentially without clothes and have them nibble around under the water at him.
That man's disgusting.
He also would take either these children or other children of nobility or just nobles themselves, and either throw them off the cliffs onto the very sharp rocks about 80, 100 feet below, or make them walk off the cliffs.
For what? That's not no
Just for
want.
no
That's
reason.
Oh, but it is, right? If you've run out of things to want, you start wanting
Other things.
twisted, unnatural, and self-destructive things.
For
Right.
me, it would just be buying a college, buy you a set from,
Okay.
from
Then what?
Cash App.
Then what? You've still got $120 billion.
I'll buy you a set.
I'd buy
Okay.
an
I'll
island.
buy another college.
So you've got unlimited means. You'll run out of things to buy. Then you'll start wanting not so good things.
I'll go to Germany.
Things you
buy
hadn't
school in
thought.
Germany.
Okay.
I think this is like kind of the whole thing with like the internet Silk Road too. Like it starts with like, oh, I'll just use it to buy something. Now I'm buying weird things now. Now I'm going to prison.
Something like that. So a way of thinking about this on a smaller scale, right? On a smaller scale. The not Tiberius kind of thing. You'll notice that the soul is actually quite organized, because it's organized around a few, or even just one, incredibly powerful, unnatural, or self-destructive desire. This isn't just the soul of a tyrant in the political sense. This is the soul of anyone who's swayed by these kinds of wants. So another good example of this, not just Tiberius, but somebody like a heroin addict. Somebody who has one thing that they want that is destroying them. Right? This is why actually most people who do win the lottery are in abject poverty within a year. It's because they find something that they want, and they pursue it, and they pursue it, and they pursue it, and they pursue it, and they waste every penny they have. More than they won. And wind up destroying themselves. So, another professor of mine once said to do with this. So, I used to have lots of problems, but now that I'm addicted to heroin, I only have one problem. It's heroin. Right? It's getting more heroin.
Taking that out of context.
I know, I'm recording, it's even better. But it's a good example. Right? Sure, you want tons and tons of different things, you're being pulled in every direction, you can't decide what you want, but then you decide what you want, and you're being pulled in one direction. Unfortunately, that direction is destroying you and probably destroying everyone around you. Okay, so Tuesday, we're going to look at why, well, if it isn't obvious yet, why the life of the tyrant is so bad. Because it's not just you want things that you didn't want to want. It's not just you die from a heroin overdose. There's a lot to this as to what goes so horribly wrong. And this will be the rest of Book 9 of the Republic.